And tonight, especially, we want to celebrate that for the first time in the 92 history of the Academy Awards, a female conductor will be leading the orchestra for this performance.
Finally.
So here is Maestra Eímear Noone to conduct this year's nominated Best Original Scores.
That's really long.
You've probably seen it before a good few times. Give me one second.
That's all I was thinking, was that needs to be edited down.
How you doing, listen, thanks a million for joining us. I'm just going to do a quick intro, if I can get my screen across there. So everybody, I'd like to welcome Eímear Noone, conductor, composer and speaker. She's an award-winning Irish composer, composing extensively for film and video games. She's responsible for some of the most enduring soundscapes on World of Warcraft and other best-selling video games. The Irish Independent called her the Irish Queen of Games Music, and she's one of the world's premier conductors of game scores. In 2020, Eímear became the first female principal conductor at the Academy Awards ceremony, which I understand she didn't slap anyone at. She also conducts concerts worldwide, including the bass hologram Maria Callas tour, an event which brought the beloved opera legend Maria Callas back to the stage via hologram with a full live orchestra. She's conducted orchestras such as the Royal Philharmonic, the BBC Concerts, the Singapore Symphony Orchestra, and the Danish National Symphony. Through her music in World of Warcraft, Eímear's music has reached over 100 million people and continually inspired players to invent and build new worlds for 15 years. So yeah, welcome, Eímear. There's an awful lot of firsts there, and I'll come back to those a little bit later, but I might just to set the frame of this. When did you first think I wanted to go into music?
You know what? It's just always been who I am. So I don't even remember, but I do remember the first time I saw a conductor on TV. I was about 7, and I straight away I saw the energy and the electricity of the whole thing, and I went, I think, yeah, that's what I'm going to do.
Because so did I, but I didn't get to be a composer. So I kind of waved the wand around at the speakers with whatever blaring out. But then you did that. I mean, in a way, a simple question, but it's not a simple question. What does a composer, or what does a conductor actually do? What's the job?
So your job really, one of the things that people don't realize is that when we get together for a concert, say, or when we do a big recording session, for a recording session, generally, we've not seen the music before at all. So even if I've written it, it's been so long since the beginning, the first cue in the movie, and you have to write it so fast, I've forgotten it by the time I have to record it. But if I'm recording somebody else's music, I'm generally sight reading, as are all the players. So we have to do that day, record the movie or record the video game or whatever it is, the album, whatever it is we're doing. So the most basic level of what I do as a conductor is to make sure what people hear is what I want, what I think is, something befitting their ears. So I deal with the technicalities of bringing all of these people together and having, a pristine, as we call it, ensemble, which means together, meaning to the millisecond, that it's perfectly together, that we're all perfectly in the same tempo, nobody's ahead or behind, that all of the details are just, it's one organism. So my job is to make sure that we're one organism. And we have to deal with, depending on the size of the orchestra, or if we're in a concert hall, if we have a massive orchestra, we have to deal with things like psychoacoustical delay between the front where I'm standing and the back because it's so large, So I have to figure out if the sound is delayed between the back of the orchestra and the front, how do I compensate for that? And so then the other thing is I don't have time to speak to the orchestra very much, and also I don't know what language I'm dealing with. So my technique needs to be able to tell the players everything they need to know about what to do musically, rather than me speaking to them and giving them a treatise on how to do this passage or how to do that passage. We'd be there all month, and we can't do that. So I'll give you an example. I'm doing a 90-minute concert at the Royal Albert Hall in June with the Royal Phil, and we have 90 minutes of music, and we have 3 hours minus 20-minute break to rehearse it from beginning to end, and that's the same day as the concert. So that's the extreme level. Oh, it's absolutely terrifying.
Horrific.
Yeah, that's super stressful, but that's the in certain situations that's the gig, and you have to be able to do that, which is why you do 2 minutes at the Oscars, 2.5, 3 minutes, whatever, and you've had 5 rehearsals, and you're like, what am I going to do with all this time? This is great. That's why I looked so chill. I was like, yay. But Like I had more time to rehearse than I have for this 90-minute program, you know, with
so
a whole lot of people.
That 90-minute program, how much preparation then would you do to be able to get yourself into a position where you can
for something that's
that?
so for something that's that intense, and I know as of last night exactly what's going to be on the program, because also when you're doing, you know, when you're doing video game music, you're doing film music, or you're doing something that's in the contemporary consciousness, you want to surprise the fans with something they haven't heard before that's right of the minute, especially gamers. I have a big surprise for the Albert Hall that nobody knows about yet. And it's not something that, if they've heard it before the concert on the game, they're intense fans because there's a massive game about to launch. And I'm going to give you one little hint. I'm bringing a young Irish artist with me to the Royal Albert Hall who has performed on 2 tracks by a very famous game composer from Japan. That's enough. And I can't mention it or anything. It's so intense. I can't give away anything. But because people will know what game it is if I mention his name. So things like that, where we're literally writing the arrangements today and tomorrow, because the orchestra needs to have the parts in advance and all that kind of thing. But it's intense, and if you can't operate at a level of intensity where you can be very detail oriented with an intensely short amount of time, it's kind of like, you know, the endurance test is part of the job. You have to pass the endurance test as well as all the rest of the skills and challenges, and the musical, the technical, the physical, all of it. But to go back to my job, it's kind of part sign language, part interpretive dance, part body language, part just pure telepathy. So it was really interesting. I had to do a few concerts with the mask on during COVID, and I was like, that's half of my communication is gone. So my eyes were like bulging out of my face trying to tell people things, you know, because we can't speak to each other during the music. So your facial expressions, you know, Botox is not a thing a conductor can ever do, you know, because everything we're telling the orchestra is here and in our hands, but eye contact is everything. And even the way you breathe and the way every movement gives off your energy, your vibe that you're giving the players. And we're just vibe merchants. It's just unbelievable. If there's a bad vibe in the room, turning that freight train around is a big deal. But so yeah, this is also really basic stuff. Timekeeper, like you wouldn't believe, as in I'm look at this here. It's like the number of minutes I have to rehearse each piece, and I have to keep it to that, or something gets knocked off the program. But that's the same in a session, and it's to kind of keep your head under pressure. When I'm working in a session with directors, producers, and composers who aren't performers, and this is the thing, there's people come to film and video game and media composition from different worlds, and that's totally cool. That's what makes it interesting, and that's what makes it fun to collaborate and so on. But when I have somebody who's not that experienced with how the orchestra lives and breathes, I'll get, okay, we have to do X number of minutes per hour, and we go in 3-hour sessions when we're recording. We need 6 minutes of 6 minutes is actually quite civilized, of massive bombastic giant music in an hour, and an hour is 50 minutes because we do a 10-minute break on the hour, which is absolutely warranted. So I'll get this. We you know, oh my God, we're all the way into the first hour. We've only recorded 2 minutes. I'm like, yeah, that's the way it goes. It's like a you know, it's like a pyramid. We start off with this small amount. We do sound checks. We have to set our levels. Everybody has to wake up. Musicians don't even start to function until 10 a.m. We're totally bred that way. And we all have to figure out, what is today? What are we playing? Is it quirky Danny Elfman? Is it lush John Barry style? Is it a hybrid thing where we're separate from the strings, from the percussion, what is it? What are we doing? So we need, as human beings, to figure out the beginning of our day. Everyone needs to tune, find the best bowings and the best fingerings for things, and look through the day. So I'll plan the day like a general, and I'll do things. It's an energy management thing. I'll do things where I won't start with something really slow, because if I do, the orchestra won't wake up. I won't start with something intensely difficult or fast, because they'll go, Jesus, is this our whole day? And I lose them from the get-go. And I won't start with something where the horns are playing really high first thing in the morning, or I won't start with something, I'll start with something where everyone's playing, so the engineer can get levels on everybody. So I'll do all of these things. I'll set all these things up to really utilize our time, but I'll have somebody going, oh my God. I'll be like, yeah, but we'll get 10 minutes done in the third hour, so it just, you have to kind of keep your head and manage expectations. And I'll tell them going in, look, this is how it's going to be. It's all good. This is how we do it. It'll work. You'll get everything you need. But if you want us running through stuff so that you have 6 minutes of whatever down on tape, we can do that. But you're not going to want that.
How do you find that sounds like that sort of role needs, whether it's true confidence or projected confidence, that you need to be the most confident person in the room. But a little bit like, sometimes with directors who are the least people, they're on the set least of all, on set least of all the people that we're working with. Presumably all the musicians are literally every day, they're going to, they're playing their instruments most days. Do you find that comes naturally, or did you have to train yourself into being able to front that kind?
Oh, that's a great question. So it's for me, I have a split personality. The composer is the introvert, and the conductor is the extroverted introvert. So it doesn't, for my personality types, I'm like a Virgo, I'm neurotic, I have to have tools for performance. I can't just go, I'm super confident and, maybe possibly a sociopath. So which would help greatly, I have to say. Because my personality is kind of neurotic and nervy and all of that stuff, I've had to acquire tools over the course of my career to feel okay in the situation. And everyone tells you the first 1,000 times in front of an orchestra, the amount of information coming at you is so overwhelming. You just feel like you just want to grab something and hold on, because it is so intense. You have, even visually, you have 90 maybe more people in front of you, and you're standing on a box, you're completely exposed. And it's just so completely overwhelming in terms of stimulus. You have stuff going into your ears, you have stuff coming at you from here, from there, from everywhere. You have the score in front of you that you're trying to read and interpret, especially if you haven't seen it before. And it's just a lot. And then for me, I have holograms and a monitor down here, and I have streamers and punches and click tracks and tracks, and oh my God, why do I do this?
I now know why you and our mutual friend Kirsten are friends. there's a similarity there. I might just bring you briefly, because I want to talk about the composing as well, and a few other bits and pieces, but I might just bring you briefly to the performance part of, to your performance, because, well, at least for me in an audience, when I'm looking at a symphony orchestra, I'm looking at the back of the conductor. And I trained as an actor, and we talked about acting through our backs and through our legs and through the elbows and everything like that. Is it part of your process to think about that, or again, is that something that you allow come from the music, or do you actually consider that you are also performing to an audience?
It 100% comes from the music. And I've taught a lot of conductors. Actually taught someone that was on stage on Sunday. I've taught a lot of conductors, and I always get, hey, you know that move you do where you did it, and I'm like, I have no clue what that means, because what I did was I studied a basic vocabulary I studied with several different conductors, different, American, German, and British, and I got lots of different styles, and I took that vocabulary internally, and through years and years of doing it, that vocabulary becomes something that you can string together with syntax and grammar and language. And like an actor who's reading a script, there's a certain amount of it that's completely, if you have to sight read something, and now by the time I've gotten to a concert, I'm not sight reading, but you're so much of it is instinctive after a while, and so much of it is internal and intrinsic and all of those things. And that's how the language becomes your personal style, and that's what you want from an artist. You don't want me choreographing my stuff. Actually, I am considering working with I want to change things up after COVID and stuff, and I want to try some new things. And instead of looking at other conductors, because there's a lot of sameness out there, and I don't want to go there, I was actually thinking of working with a choreographer to see how I can do what I do slightly differently, but not to actually choreograph the pieces, because that's insincere to me, because I'll change it up in the moment depending on what I'm getting from the orchestra and what I'm feeling. Certain things I'll keep the same, certain dangerous transitions and moments of absolute abject fear, I will do the same thing that I did in rehearsal. But yeah, it's a very physical thing. I did choose a style over trying different styles that I felt the audience would be able to see what I was communicating, at least in my hands, if they can't see my face. And I've done a lot of work where I've got a camera on my music stand, which is the best angle under your chin you've ever
great.
had.
Yeah,
and you know what's my favorite?
Never let anyone take a picture of you that way.
Fabulous. And my favorite thing is the latency between myself and what I'm doing, and the giant jumbotron in front of me showing me late what I just did, while I'm trying to continue on doing something, and it's rhythmic, so you're just like, oh, don't look up, it's has
it ever thrown you?
Nah, you can't let that happen.
Okay. Yeah. God, it sounds terrifying. Like, just to, for my little kid thing, waving around my wand is like, if I knew how terrifying that was, I obviously never did. I might just ask you very briefly, in terms of, before we talk about your own compositions and your own role as a composer, just in terms of working with other composers, and some of them dead, long dead. Do you consider the composer, or certainly a living composer, do you consider their feelings, or do you generally not have any contact with them?
Oh, I definitely do. Do. And I think about the practicalities. That's one thing. Music, I remember as a music student and studying musicology, nobody ever thought of the practicalities of what we have to do. I remember being in composition class in Trinity, and we had the wonderful oh my gosh, how did his name just disappear out of my head? Dante, wonderful composer, wonderful teacher, teaching me. I'm not awake yet, guys, honest to God. So Dante was teaching us a piece by Xenakis, amazing Greek composer, had all these separated out these specific notes and specific string lines. And he was like, why do you think he wrote it that way? Why do you think he balanced it that way? And why do you think? And everyone was like, oh, because if you analyze these intervals and this numeral, and I was like, no, he gave that line to the guy sitting on the outside because they're louder, they're nearest the audience. Tonic was like, oh my God, you're right. And the practicalities of doing things. For instance, one of my favorite stories okay, first of all, let me give you this, paraphrase this quote. Leonard Bernstein, who of course is all over the Oscars with West Side Story, a piece I've conducted many times, and I absolutely love that musical. It's my favorite, actually. But he would say, all you need for inspiration to occur, or all you need to get a piece done, I'm paraphrasing, is a good idea and not quite enough time. You know, and that's a really, really important one, not quite enough time. And my husband always says, you know, pieces are never finished, only abandoned. And the other one is, George Gershwin, and this is such a typical composer thing. I know this story has to be true. George Gershwin sat down opened the newspaper, having his breakfast one morning. He's going through the paper and he sees an advertisement for brand new premiere of piece by George Gershwin, and he totally forgot. Forgot about it. So Rhapsody in Blue, right? You have and like typical to start with a solo. It's like solo quick, right? This unbelievable clarinet solo, but do something quick. That's one line. I can write that down, you know. And then he has these big pieces where the orchestra's playing the theme, and then there's massive piano cadenzas where you have the theme mixed in with all this stuff. There's like arpeggios and runs, and you know that he was improvising that stuff on the night because he didn't have time to write down all the piano stuff. So he had orchestra play, well, write down the orchestra bits, quick, do that. I'll play around with it in the middle, and then we'll all play together. And and that just is, I love it. And it was not quite enough time, and genius came out of it. But as a composer, I can listen to it and I can hear I can hear how the piano parts were kind of coming together out of his head, and he's improvising, going, oh yeah, that's good, I'll keep that. What did I just do? So yeah, that it does influence when I'm performing something. I think about the practicalities of the time. I remember studying with a particular conductor who liked to add to Beethoven and say, oh, the flute couldn't do, it didn't have that range at that time. And when he repeats that idea later on, only it's the key is transed up higher. Now the flute has those notes today. So I'm going to write that part in. And I'd be like, no, because composers also know what we have, what our cloth is, and we will cut our cloth to the measure that that's required. We understand limitations are a friend, because that means when you have the blank page and absolutely no limitations, and you can do anything at all. That's the scariest thing. Like, oh my God, where am I going to start with this thing? Whereas
that horror.
Yeah, it's the same for all creatives, embracing limitations, embracing obstacles. Oh, all of a sudden the budget got slashed and we have to cut the percussion from 6 down to 2 players. And you're like, oh, which just happened to me actually on something else. And you go, okay, all right, so the percussion parts are going to be different. And you know what? Let's make it so that they are unique because of the limitations, not because something's missing. And that was COVID for me, was we can't do this, we can't do that, we can't do the other. So let's create something completely different that wouldn't exist at all otherwise. One thing we came up with, because we couldn't have choirs, we couldn't have a big orchestra, we created a project called Electric Arcade, where instead of having a giant orchestra, we had a rock band in the middle of a small orchestra with 4 brilliant solo singers, instead of a choir. And it's completely unique and different because of the limitations. And we created special arrangements for it where we took things that never rocked before and now they rock. So, that's actually, I'm tripping over into the compositional side of things, but
no, let's go for it, because I think it leads us towards that. Because I mean, I think for me anyway, the idea of video games is not the first. If I was talking to a composer and they said they were a video games composer, I go, oh, okay, well, you're the first video games composer. You are the first video games composer that I have ever met. And obviously you compose for live action and for animation as well. But just to set the scene of it, how did that happen in terms of, how did you move into that world?
Well, my background is totally traditionally classical with some trad thrown in. I grew up in a village where you could be sort of a teacher, a doctor, a nurse, a shopkeeper, or a composer. We had one composer living in the middle of the village across the road from school, Paddy Fahey. So I was like, oh, that's a thing. And it's funny. It's funny that just having somebody that's a person that's not wearing a wig and dead and stuff, you know, that's what they do. For a kid, it's like, oh, that's a thing, you know, you never think about it ever again as being exceptional or different or anything. And that's magic. So I did, you know, I hear this will make you guys laugh. So my first couple of weeks in national school, and there were like 11 people in my class. The local village school, as typical as you can possibly get.
Just for everyone else, national school is when we're little kids. It's from the age of kind of 4
elementary,
to 12.
Elementary school. And we were given, you know, on mainland Europe, you know, you often have kids playing recorders, but the Irish version is the penny whistle or the tin whistle. And we're all given one each. They're handed out to us, you know. And I was fascinated. I was like, I can get a sound out of this straight away, and it makes music. And it's, you know, I was about 5. And I came in the next day playing the theme from Glen Rowe.
And for those of you who are not from Ireland, Glen Rowe was like when we had 2 channels, it was this soap that was on a Sunday evening. But actually, everyone hated the music of Glen Rowe because it reminded you that you had to go to school the following day. Right. So I'd say they loved you with that.
Yeah, and you had
child prodigy.
Yeah, it was set on a farm. Big time drama on the farm in Ireland.
There was an affair. There was an affair.
I still remember Biddy having the affair. Oh gosh, that was scandalous. But anyway, the theme, which I still remember, went yet da dee da 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 dee da 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 dee up ba dee da 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 ba da da dee. You know, and if you heard that theme on a Sunday night and you didn't have your homework done, it's like burned into, it's Pavlovian for Irish people of that generation. It is Pavlovian. You hear that theme now, you're like, you know, I don't have my homework done for Monday. But anyway, so I went in the next day playing that. And the teacher realized I could play by ear. And
you weren't from a musical family. You didn't have
I wasn't.
Generations of musicians.
My grandfather had been a traditional Irish musician at a time when you couldn't do that as your job. Nobody got paid to do that. And he was very talented. Apparently, it wasn't his job. I never met him. He died before I was born. So my mother had noticed I had a good singing voice, and I was on stage at 4, and she wasn't great at being a stage mom at all. I think she did it once, and she was so terrified that it was later on. But anyway, my national school teacher came to my parents and said, your child must study music formally. And my parents were building a house. She said, you must buy a piano. And they were still in their 20s at the time. They couldn't afford a piano. So for the first 2 years of my primary school teacher's daughter, who was 16, teaching me, I practiced on the school piano until we could get our own buckety out of tune awfulness. But everything that was around me in the small village and the town that I grew up in, everything that was music, I just ate like food, like a starving person. I eventually got a scholarship to the College of Music in Dublin, and I was one of these kids, country kids on the train at 6 a.m. every Saturday going to Dublin to study. And I eventually went to Trinity College and then studied, did master classes all over the world and things like that. And just constantly searching, I want to be better. I want to be better. And I'm still that way. I want to be better. I want to be better. Where can I need to fix this or change that or all of those things. But in terms of the video game thing, I was always fascinated by how orchestral music made me feel and how it could make other people feel without us using any words, and how that feeling can change so quickly with one shift in harmony. You get goosebumps, or your stomach drops into your feet, or let alone what rhythm does for us and how physically we relate to rhythm and all of these things. And that's existed in classical music forever, and we call it affect. The way painters, in earlier in Renaissance times, or really the Age of Enlightenment, would have talked about affect, drawing forth emotion from your audience. Always fascinated me. I mean, it was so intense for people before all of the stimuli that we have today. Was so intense that a particular key change that they weren't used to was like, oh, shocking, Beethoven's Fourth Piano Concerto opens in one key, and then the orchestra comes in a different key. That would have been shocking at the time. Or we had an interval. If you play an octave, so we've eight notes on the octatonic scale, and if you put your thumb on middle C and then your finger on the next C up, that's your octave. If you split that exactly in half, or a string exactly in half, according to Pythagoras, you get what's called the tritone, or the augmented fourth. And that was so obscenely, intensely, what's the word? Unlikable or horrendous, that it was called Diabolo Musicae, the devil of music, and was banned from church music for hundreds of years. And of course, we use it all the time in film music. And Leonard Bernstein decided, Diabolo Musicae, you can't, we can't use that in a love song, surely. Maria, I just met a girl named Maria. That's it right there.
Okay, wow.
He also said, can I write a song that goes through all 12 keys? I know he did it for sport. I don't know, but I know. Dear kindly Sergeant Kropke, that singing voice I mentioned left me a long time ago. But
especially 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, but these are also going back to the practicalities. We were told you can't use the devil of music, and you certainly can't use it in a love song, and you absolutely cannot use it. The first statement, the first two notes of the big statement of the love song, Maria, you cannot do that. And so he did, and made a huge hit, unforgettable music staple out of it. And then you can't write a song that goes through all 12 keys in one short song. Well, he did, because it was sport and it was fun and it was music. It's one thing using something as sport or inspiration, but it's another thing transcending that, making it a standalone, amazing piece of work. So I'm not simplifying or anything. He transcended that. But anyway, this always fascinated me. So I studied composition very young. I won this place. I was masquerading as somebody else from another school. There's a lot of dodgy sort of, Eímear being shoehorned into something along the way. The Irish Chamber Choir were doing a schools workshop, and my school wasn't invited to do it, but the school next door in Athlone was invited, and their music teacher was the music director of my town, Ballinasloe Musical Society, and we were doing Godspell of all things. And I was his assistant on Godspell. Anything I could get my hands into. I was playing piano, coaching the singers, and he was the music director. So they'd be coached by the time they got to him. Loved every second of it. He goes, listen, we've been asked to do this thing, the Irish Chamber Choir. Do you want to do it? And I was like, what? They would sing my piece of music. I could hear actual professionals. And to me, that was just, I stayed up all night because he asked me about 5 days before the thing, writing this thing. And I had no notation software. I had no training in orthography, which is the art of writing music down. I was taking out my piano books, trying to figure out how things were properly notated for the choir. And it was a disaster. They told me my handwriting was terrible, but if I fixed it that day in the workshop, they said, we'll perform this on RT radio, and we'll do it in a concert in Dublin Castle. And I nearly died. I was 15. I nearly died. And I'll never forget Anne Buckley, who was the soprano at the time, the conductor, Colin Mobby, who secretly entered me into composition film schools all over the place without me knowing it. He said, you can't write a top C at the beginning of her solo, which is a horrible thing to do to a soprano, truly. And she's like, no, I got it. And I loved her. I loved singers and orchestra. No, I got it. That's happened to me so many times. But that was absolutely transformative for me, hearing this music with these stunning voices. I've never forgotten them for it. But I went on, Colin entered me behind my back for the Ennis Imro Composition Summer School. And 12 of us were there every year. And we had something like 6 teachers for 12 of us. And they were people like one of my favorite composers now from Finland, Kalevi Aho, taught us. Carlisle Rasmussen from Denmark taught us, all contemporary art music composers. We had these amazing teachers. I was the youngest there 2 years in a row. And then UCLA Extension had an outpost in Dublin, and I get this letter of acceptance in the mail, and I'm going, what? I didn't apply for this. Hooray, this looks amazing. I mean,
got into college.
And it was so bad because it was Screen Training Ireland or Screen Skills Ireland, who are my heroes endlessly. But I was again masquerading. I had just done my leaving cert, my state exams. I was just turned 18. And here I was doing this professional training course, Screen Skills Ireland and UCLA Extension. And I don't know what, how, who, it was Colin from the Irish Chamber Choir, my angel. You know, everybody needs an angel. And I just became obsessed with, I was already obsessed with film music. I always used to sit and watch the credits and go, I remember watching Matrix for the first time going, oh my God, what did he do to film music? This is crazy. This is outrageous and amazing. And who did it? Don Davis, who I got to tell that story to many years later. And we communicated for the first month only by the medium of limericks. But that's a million stories. But so I became obsessed with film music. And what happened was, through film music, I got my first credit on a video game by accident. I was in college, hired out the college bar in first year. David Downs, who went on to create Celtic Woman, was in fourth year. I was in first year. And David comes into the bar knowing that we'd all been at chapel choir rehearsal, because you had to be able to sight sing to do that. So it was mostly the music students. And he goes, what are you all doing tomorrow? We're like, why, what's going on? He goes, I'll have 40 quid if you come and work, sing on this thing, something for some Japanese composer. We're all like, yeah, deadly, that's beer money. So I remember sitting down and handwriting out choir parts. And there was a bunch of us from Trinity. There's a few from UCD, a few from Anuna, a few from Maynooth. And we sang on this thing for this Japanese composer. 6 months later, my brother calls me and he's like, oh my God, did you work on Metal Gear Solid? And I was like, no. And he goes, myself and the lads are sitting here looking at your credit on screen. So there was lots of silly shenanigans. But Screen Skills Ireland brought over a famous orchestrator and arranger. He was Tori Amos's arranger. He worked on Batman and The Insider and Ali and all this kind of stuff. And he hired me for my work in the class. So I was studying with Gerhard Marx, and I ran an orchestra for 5 years that I set up in second year in college. I was studying with him. I'd studied with Professor Emeritus from Juilliard, Professor William Schaefer. I'd done master classes all over the place. And so my conducting and composition were running parallel. But then I got a job as an orchestrator, and I thought, this is a great way to practice on other people's music.
Make the mistakes
Sure.
on their stuff, and then.
Well, no, I was an assistant, so I had supervision. But what happened was the budget came in for this video game, and it really wasn't enough to pay my boss. So he said, here, look, they don't have the budget of films I'm used to working on. He would have, like, I know what he would get paid a page, and video games hadn't gotten there yet at this point. So he said, you do it. And I was like, duh, oh my God, freaking out. And I actually orchestrated, I orchestrated in Dublin and came out to do the recording sessions. And I remember sitting in the studio. I wasn't even given the cinematic. I wasn't given any footage. I was just working on the composer was his first time working with orchestra ever. And I'm looking up at this cinematic of the first World of Warcraft, and I went, oh my God, this is special. I knew it was special. And since then, it's had something like 130 million individual players, and everybody, it took us all by surprise, but it didn't at the same time, if you know what I mean. I mean, it was everybody that was involved was really intense about whatever it was they did. And Barry, I know you know everybody in what we do is slightly screw loose intensity. And it was, so that was the first one. But yeah, everything I've ever done has been on the back of something else. And I never had any contacts. I had no relatives. Nepotism has eluded me. And now my brother-in-law is actually a Tony Award-winning Broadway producer, and we still haven't worked together. So it's like, am I destined to never have nepotism? I want to feel what that's like. That would be awesome.
Nah, it's better talent and hard work, he says. I can't believe that we're 50 minutes into this. I have a million other questions that I'm not going to get to. I'm conscious that I also want to open the floor up to some of the students to ask some questions. So while they're thinking of that, I might just ask I said at the beginning about you're the first woman to have conducted the Academy Awards, first woman to have played to have conducted a lot of these big concert halls. I didn't register that until I actually read through your CV, that every time I went to the National Concert Hall, nearly every time it was the back of a man I was looking at, and not the back of a woman. So you're a role model now, whether you like it or not, but I know, how important is that to you? Is that no? But it is true. So you've been a great role model now to women in the industry. Is that something that you think about? Is that something? And we know you talk about things. So,
honest to God, I just put one foot in front of the other, and I try not to screw up the chances of the next one behind me by doing a half decent job. I have fought some battles for the industry that I'm proud of, and we fought a massive legal battle here in California to protect pregnant women off the stage, which is now California state law. Things like that I'm proud of, because it was something I didn't have to do, but was intensely difficult. I do take note of how I conduct myself, how I operate in the industry. Because I feel like women, when you stand on a podium or when you're in the scoring stage, and this is true of directors, it's true of so many different careers, you don't just get judged on your own merit or as yourself. All women are being judged on what you do that day, and that's not fair. And I don't appreciate that. If I have a bad day, and in the course of a long career, you will have bad days. If I have a bad day, that's not on anybody else. It might not even be on me, because I have enough experience at this point to have a floor that I can't fall through. But everyone has a bad day now and again. And I want to get to a point where a female artist or creative professional is judged just on her own and isn't representing absolutely every other woman in the whole industry. So I think we're a long way from that. But I just try and keep my side of the street clean. And I try to, you know, pull other people up when I can. I'm constantly programming other women composers when I program concerts. I'm doing that at the Royal Albert Hall. I'm bringing 2 Irish singers with me. I have another Irish singer I'm doing with the Royal Scottish. And I try to, you know, not have the same people all the time. I'm writing a piece called Daughters of the Pirate Queen, where I have 11 of my favorite Irish female artists involved across all genres, wherever I can. And I don't expect anything in return. I'm not doing it for any of those reasons, but wherever I can. And the female conductors program I'm involved with out of the National Concert Hall in Dublin, which I absolutely love the people running that. If that existed when I was a student, I would have lost my mind, you know. So I do what I can, but the best thing that I can do is try and keep my work level as high as I can, because you're still representing everybody else, unfortunately, whether you like it or not.
Okay, Eímear, I have a couple of questions in. Let's see how many we can get through. So one of them is from Carla, who, sorry for bothering. That's very, very polite of Carla. You briefly approached this, but I'm still wondering, in stylistic terms, is there a big difference between creating pieces for a film and for a video game?
Do you know what? It's like this. A composer is a composer. I mean, there's certain, you become more comfortable in certain styles because you've just done it more, to be really boring about it. And it also depends on the game. I mean, depends if you're doing a big fantasy game where they go more is more is more, can you add more onto that? And you're like, oh, yes, I can. And that's fun. But there are other times when you're asked to be really, really minimal. I mean, I can think of lots of examples. You can take a giant World of Warcraft score versus my friend Austin Wintory's Journey score, which is chamber orchestra, and it's a lot more minimal. And then a lot of films, if you're doing action adventure, you're doing animation. Animation is, you know, all over the place. But then they might say to you, we don't want to Mickey Mouse this, we don't want Carl Stalling, we want big washes until it becomes that you need a little bit of the Carl Stalling. But it's a creative with an inspirational stimulus coming from outside of you. So when you see a piece of footage, whether it's film, whether it's game, or whether it's even a stick figure animatic, you're trying to reach down inside of yourself to create what works best for that. And that's where your creativity outside of your, as we call it, chops, your skills and your technique comes into it. Then you reach into your technique to give voice to this innate feeling you get from what you're listening to from the directors and producers, and of course, be it a video game, an animated feature, live action feature, the roles of who's the principal creative that you have to listen to change as well. So who's really the driving creative force? You have to ask yourself, what are they into? I'll even ask producers or directors to just give me a playlist of their favorite music they listen to on a daily basis. And I don't mean score. I mean, you know, are you an emo head? Are you a metal head? Are you, you know, an EDM? What is it? You know, because that gives me a little bit of a sense of I don't know, how do I say this? You know, the way when you hear a piece of music, you just react to it, one or you don't. That's like we still haven't figured out why that is. It's just innate. So what is it that this director or producer would innately, what floats their boat? What did they react to and go, oh, that's so cool? And when you say something so cool, like when I listen to AC/DC, I can't even tell you why I love them so much. You know, it's just hits me somewhere. But anyway, I hope that helps. Big fantasy genre. Okay, so technically, here's a difference. Here's one of the things that informs the stylistic difference. If you're seeing a stylistic difference, when you have in-game music on a big fantasy game, you don't have to worry about treading on dialogue. You don't have to worry about the edit. So you can write this big expansive piece. You're creating a situation and environment, or you can create a wash of sound. But either way, you don't know when the dialogue's going to hit, so you don't have to worry about it. You don't know how the editing's going to go, because that's informed by the player, so you don't have to worry about it. But when we deal with the cinematic of the game, we score a cinematic. really like we would score an action adventure feature or an animated feature. It's more similar to that. But again, it's the game. We're dealing with an indie Irish game at the moment that's like, it looks like film noir, you know. That's not going to be a big bombastic World of Warcraft thing, you know. It's really cool, by the way, out of Galway.
So I might jump in because we have a few more now. I might jump into Carla's second question, but just kind of for me is interesting because when I go over to the National Concert Hall, it's just over there, and I always feel so young. It makes me feel great. Because the demographics aren't great. Not always, but sometimes. But so from your experience, do you think pieces like the ones you've developed for World of Warcraft can help foster the interest in the game community for classical music?
Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why I do it. I mean, I used to conduct the Los Angeles Ballet. I used to, touring with Maria Callas was pure opera. I'm a, pure classical musician. But I decided at a certain point that, my role right now in my career is to get younger people as excited about orchestral music as I was as a kid. Like I see my two boys, they're 8 and 3. They love video game music. They love Encanto. I mean, I was playing the score from Encanto. Jermaine, a colleague of mine, Jermaine Franco wrote the score, and then Lin-Manuel wrote the songs. Getting them, interested in soundtrack, because also there's a visual component that sticks in people's brains and people can relate. And the intensity of the orchestra, it's one thing hearing it on recording, but there's the amount of vibes that come off of the symphony orchestra when they're playing. It's just indescribable. The audience, it's visceral for the audience, and I want younger people, and not just young people, but the community at large. I think also Ireland's a great experiment because when we see anything posh, we kind of have a bit of a, and me being from Galway and the countryside and stuff, anything with tails is a little bit intimidating. So I never do that because this music needs to belong to everybody, that we can't put up walls. It needs to be inviting and yeah, you want to share this.
Speaking of intimidating, well, the head of faculty, Ronan, who's got a lot of fathers in his name, asked a question, but it's not that relevant. But it's how challenging has it been having a father in your name? Let's skip that one. Let's skip that one. He's got like 1,000 of them. I call it Latin, he calls it Irish. I'm not sure.
So my Starbucks name is Alex, if that answers your question.
Okay, all right. Or Eímear Sigourney Weaver.
I changed Sigourney Weaver unilaterally changed the pronunciation of my name that day, and I decided, hey, if it's good enough for Sigourney, it's good enough for me. For sure. Mom, I'm here from now on.
So listen, for young directors who might want to work with a composer, but they might be a little bit intimidated, do you have any advice?
For young directors, the use of music, don't be intimidated by thematic material. It doesn't necessarily have to turn your film into a music video. One of the things that we see with directors who mightn't be as experienced or sure of what they want musically is they want to throw out anything that has any character or any foreshadowing, and they're like, I just want a texture, and the thing is, then when you're dealing with a video game director, they'll say, I want this to have a musical identity, which is exactly the opposite. And that's kind of, there's a medium in between as well, depending on where you want to be with what you're doing, but have a clear idea going in. I want the music to be another character in the movie, or I just want it to be this tiled texture in the background, or I want it to have a cool EDM vibe that doesn't really say much, just sets the emotional, and we get that in video games as well. I just want to set an emotional kind of a feeling of but I want it to be ambiguous or whatever. And one of the other things that we deal with a lot is point of view. The POV of the camera also applies to music, I'll be super simplistic, and you guys, you're filmmakers, you're going to think this is stupid, but I'm going to say it anyway. Guy is driving the car home, birds are tweeting, sun is shining, he's got a brand new shiny car, la 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 la. The music is all happy clappy and blah blah blah. That's his POV. The guy is driving car, sun is shining, birds are tweeting, music is ominous, because we already know what he's coming home to, and it ain't good, right? That's the omniscient POV for the composer. And all of the different things in between. Whose character am I scoring? Am I foreshadowing what's about to happen as that omniscient POV is? Am I in this character's head? What music would this character listen to? What's their personality? We really go there. And if you have clear direction, the other thing is, don't think you have to use musical terms when dealing with composers. Don't ever think that. Talk in terms of, give us as many adjectives as possible, as many emotions as possible. And a respectful creative will respect your creativity. Anyone that makes you feel, oh, you don't have jargon or something, that's not okay. It's your vision, and we're there to help give voice to your vision. That you're the director, and we're a production within the production. That's what the situation is. And don't ever worry about the nuts and bolts of, oh my God, the orchestra and the this and the that and the other. That's our problem. But yeah.
So for Mark, who's very impressed, and thanks for the clarity and openness. Are you ever approached by peers who feel that composing for games is still slightly lesser than composing for film?
No. Composers, the thing about composers is, look, the history of music is collaborating with other media, or creating music that has a role or a function. I mean, there's a brilliant film by Gérard Corbier who did Farinelli, but he also did a film called The King Dances, Le Roi Danse, in my terrible French accent. But it was, you see Louis XIV and his relationship with Lully, the composer, but you see Louis XIV off on his horse going hunting, and poor Lully behind with two small timpanis strapped to the back of a horse and crumb horns, and they're scoring basically his day out, And composers, it goes from that to them creating ballet together and creating opera and creating, then from there you're doing the intermezzo on a play, or then you're scoring ringtones and you're scoring whatever. Composers don't look down on a job, and it's always a challenge creatively to work with a different medium, I mean, and also to write for the concert hall, that's another thing that we do, to write for an album, to write, collaborating with other artists I'm working with a rap artist at the moment. I'm working with Stuart Copeland and Chrissy Hind on their opera, which is a totally other world. And it's so much fun and it's challenging. But no, I don't think any composer looks down on a job.
Cool. Brilliant. I have a question for Marie-Alice that I don't understand. So I don't know what a leitmotif is. How are your relations with leitmotifs, and how does the nature of adaptive music affect your music writing?
So leitmotif is something that's very much a Wagnerian term. Leitmotif is something that really, unless it's very subtle, needs to come from the director. If you have a character that has a certain theme, or you can give, you can write a score for a horror movie that's all about a haunted house. You could give a leitmotif to the haunted house as their character's motif. You can do all of that. Wagner did that a lot. Lots of composers do that. But you have to be careful with that, because it can become here he is on his horse, and every time you see him on screen, I'm being stupid about this stuff. But leitmotif is something that can be personal if it helps you if it helps you through the creative process to hang an idea on, to do something like that. We do that all the time, but you have to be careful how obvious you are with it. Because it can quickly become comedic. In fact, we use it as a comedic device all the time, especially in animation. But that's a great question.
Cool. And because I promised everyone that we'd finish it I promise these always will be within an hour, but I haven't kept it within an hour, but I am going to let you go. I'll do the one last question because it's a question about very much in contrast with you. This person, it's Nielsen, is very much at the beginning in the area. He's just recently found his passion to compose music for video games. And he doesn't have a background they don't have a background in musical studies. What sort of advice would you give a complete beginner composer such as them?
So you don't have a background in music. Okay, as I said, people come to
musical studies, don't have a background in musical studies. There might be a musical background, but
okay, in musical studies. Okay, so first of all, in your area, so as I said, music is a production within a production. If you're on a big production, we all have specializations. I co-compose with Craig, my husband. He comes from a jazz and classical background and rock background, and I come from, purely orchestral. He's a tech genius. My tech is great for what I need it to be, but when we produce together, he's got way more technical knowledge than me. I always conduct the sessions because that's my area of, let me say, it's my comfort zone. Make friends in those other areas. Don't let yourself be stifled by the fear of, I'm not an expert in this and an expert. There's very few people that are an expert in everything. And if they are, and they've gotten to the level of a big budget production, they're going to be hiring other people because they don't have time. There's not going to be enough time to do absolutely everything. Wagner wouldn't be writing the libretto as well as designing the costumes and the set. He'd have years to do that. That's fine. When you're on a film, you're the last thing on there. So often what's really scary is the music for the trailer is written before the score, and the trailer's out there and the movie's been advertised, and you're still writing the score and you haven't been in the studio yet, and all this kind of stuff. Or your concert is advertised months in advance and you've never met the orchestra and you won't meet them until the day, so that's a long-winded answer where it's just make friends with the skills outside, but get to know your outside of your area. Take as many courses as you can. There's some great professional courses. Screen Skills is fantastic in Ireland. There's if you're Norwegian, there's a fantastic group called Talent Norge, and each country has an equivalent, and they're just skill up all the time and enjoy it as a lifelong pursuit. The music you write now will be different than the music you write 10 years from now, because your skills here, you only know how to use this, that, and the other, but you'll utilize that to its fullest degree. Adding orchestra later will make a different sound, but it doesn't negate what you do now. It's going to be different because you learned this trick and that trick, and you've got a different group of, box of bells and whistles. So what you do now is relevant.
Eímear, thank you so much. That was absolutely brilliant. And thank you so much for getting up early in the morning, getting all the kids out of school, and then coming and doing this. And thanks so much for everyone all of the people who turned up. And obviously there's another Experts in Air, not quite this time next week. We're shifting around the time to try and find the best time, and hopefully I won't mess up on a time zone next week as well, and we will actually go at the time that we said we would. But most of all, Eímear, thanks a million for joining us, and it was a real pleasure. I have a million other questions on the screen, but
good luck, everybody. Good luck. See you out there.
Thanks.
Thanks a million. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, Ronan.